This video is a bunch of tips for making the most out of your ASCA conference experience. ASCA is the American Society of Consulting Arborists. They have an annual conference every December, and it is somewhat different from other conferences I've been to. The main difference in my experience is that they are very explicitly dedicated to networking. There's a reception for registered consulting arborists, which is like a special level of membership within the organization. Then there's a networking reception, which is for everyone. Well, they call the lunches networking lunches, but they also have a specific lunch for the people who are attending the conference for the first time. I haven't seen this in the last few conferences, but they used to have a mentoring lounge where you could chat with people, and the organization itself at least does establish mentor-mentee relationships if on a volunteer basis. I went to my first ASCA conference in 2014, and I was around 25 years old at that time. That is very young for ASCA. I heard someone say that in the past couple of years that the average age of the membership was in the 60s, which tells you what the demographic is like. I'm still among the youngest in the organization. So my experience has gone from being young, inexperienced, and alone at these conferences to now establishing a cohort that I look forward to seeing every single year. The conference is very expensive. Compared to other conferences, it'll be about double the cost. And my costs for this conference I just got back from was a minimum of $2,700. So the conference fee itself is, for a early bird member, is almost $1,200. Then the hotel was about $200 a night. There's different meals that they don't cover for you during the conference. I estimated that to be about $80, and my flight and the ride to the airport was almost $700. So just for the bare minimum, which is to get there for the 3.5 days of the conference, that was $2,700. They also have pre and post conference workshops, and if you decide to do those, of course you have to pay extra, not just for the workshop but also for your extra stay. I did a short one, just a half-day one, and that was an extra $150. I did stay there for 2 additional days and had a rental car, and did a bunch of activities, treated people to meals, things like that. For that, assuming that I was alone, it would be an additional $1,200. $4,000 is more likely what I spent. Is it worth it? I do think so. It is actually my favorite conference to attend, and one that I would hope to attend, one that I would prioritize attending over the others. I'm going to divide this video up into tips for the main part of the conference, doing the bare minimum, and other tips for making the experience even better if you can afford both the time and the money. First, my recommendations for the general part of the conference, if you're going there just for the conference. If it's your first time, do as much as possible of what they're offering to get your money's worth. If you're RCA already, there's an RCA meetup, there's a first timers luncheon, there's all the different talks, there's also a networking reception. Go to all of them, stay for the whole thing as best as you can, because that way you'll get an idea of what the conference is going to be like. I'm going to then directly contradict myself, which is to say, conferences, they're very exhausting. They're tiring because there's not only these long talks, these long days of talks that you may not be accustomed to, but there's also an expectation that we put on ourselves, or some expectation in general, to spend a lot of time networking. So it's very easy to burn out socially, especially if you're an introvert, and I am also an introvert. And it's important to take time and energy back where you can. Maybe that would look like sitting down to lunch, socializing with people a little bit, and if you're tired, just leave. You don't have to stay at the table after you're done eating. Maybe that's like going to the first half hour of any reception, skipping talks that you absolutely have no interest in. At least with the ASCA conference, you have access to the recordings afterwards. It's more important to preserve your energy to make sure that your conference experience is sustainable and you're going to want to come back in the future. And related to that, a sub point is you could consider what is most important to you for this conference. What's your priority? Is it to spend more time learning, or is it networking? And of course, you can strike a balance between those, but some of the networking and socializing continues on really late. At this conference, I was staying up regularly till midnight, and I'm sure people stay up well beyond that. That has a direct impact on your alertness for the talks. My next tip is, if you haven't tried it yet, download the conference app. What you'll find there is the agenda, a place where you can ask questions for the speakers, create or RSVP for unofficial meetups, ones that are not related to the official conference program. You can coordinate carpools, exercise with people. There's a lot of connections that you can make on there. And in particular, they publish the attendee list. This is a thing that ASCA has done since I attended, but it used to be just in a PDF form. What I would do is look up arborists that were in my area and try to talk to them at the conference. Sometimes I would have some questions for them after I've looked them up, and it was a way to direct my networking. If you have difficulty with social situations, it helps to have some topic of conversation, some questions, and it's very much expected that people will approach each other during this conference. So don't feel like you're being weird for doing that. Another tip is to try to stay at the hotel if possible. My very first conference, I stayed off-site to save money, but as I continued on and I started staying at the hotel, I realized that there's so many opportunities for organic interactions that I just never got because I was headed off early. If I needed to get dinner and I hadn't made plans with anyone, then I would leave and I would just cut off the opportunities for socializing at that point. But after staying at the hotel, if you have downtime like that, you can just go back to your room, decompress, and you can always go back down to the lobby. Usually there's people there, people at the bars and at the restaurants. And there's another opportunity for just chatting with people randomly. And if that's a dud, you can just go back to your room again. So I find that has actually become a really valuable part of the conference experience as my priorities shift a little bit more from learning and talks towards networking and hanging out. And the last general tip I have is about just the general act of networking. People don't really like that word. I can't say I like it either, but that's what it is. You're building your network. And if you are someone who is more antisocial, or you have social anxiety or awkwardness, like I've absolutely been there, what I find to be helpful is to just be curious about people, not go into these exchanges with an expectation that I'm going to come away with their business card. As late as this conference, I finally learned that not every interaction has to be very long either. I met someone that I heard of and had been meaning to talk to, and all we did was introduce ourselves and exchange one sentence, and then we just kind of moved on. But I know that next time I see him, it's going to be a lot easier because we've already introduced ourselves. I used to think that I needed to spend more time, and that would get to the point of it being awkward, where maybe neither of us know what to say, and we're just kind of in this like, oh, we should be talking to each other because we're right here, but we don't have much to say. I also find that people really, really enjoy talking about themselves, and that has helped me because I tend to be curious about people. And once you start asking questions and you get people going, people love that shit. Everyone loves talking about themselves. I probably also love talking about myself, but I also really like listening to people as well. And don't feel bad if you have to exit a situation that is getting a little too awkward for you, or if you're getting tired. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. You could need to go to your room You could need to get a drink. You could need to go to the restroom. There's no reason to just stand somewhere and be awkward. It's okay to remove yourself from a situation. This is my next tier of tips, which is if you have a little bit extra money and time to spend. My first tip is to attend pre and post conference workshops if you're interested in it. It gives you a deeper dive into some topics that maybe you wouldn't get access to otherwise, at least not through an easy source. Some of the ones that were available for this conference was tree biomechanics, urban forestry one, and tree anatomy. And I chose the biomechanics one. And that also put me at the venue earlier. You get to interact more with people who are in your workshop, especially if it's a multi-day one, because there's fewer people at the venue at that time. It's more likely that you're going to run into the same people over and over, and that repeated interaction is also something that helps set the relationship. In a similar vein, if you can afford it, arrive a day or two earlier. One to see the city that you're going to be in, do something interesting, make it a little bit more like travel instead of just coming for the conference, finishing it, and running off as soon as possible. And again, it puts you at the venue when there are fewer people around, and there will be people who are gonna just be at the bars or the restaurants. Some folks that I met before the actual conference started, we kept interacting with each other throughout the conference, and that made it really nice to just kind of have a group or have some people, some familiar faces I could continue returning to. My next tip, which is a reiteration of a tip that I already gave, is that you can totally skip talks. I mean, you can even skip talks and not watch them later if they're really not interesting. If you don't find a relevance. At some point, when you go to a whole bunch of conferences, you find that there's repetition in these talks. Sometimes people repeat the same talk within the conference, like the biomechanics was repeated. There's people who will take their talks to different groups, so maybe their local chapter and then the ASCA conference. The more conferences you go to and the more workshops, you find that eventually they get old. I shouldn't be at the stage where I'm ditching these talks, but I do, and I think that my experience is better for them because I get to be outside more. I take breaks, and it makes me more focused for the stuff that I'm actually interested in. And it makes me want to keep coming back. I don't want to do my conference experience the way other people do. So I just want to say it's okay. It's okay to do that. Even if you paid a shit ton of money, you can watch the videos later if you really have to. The next tip is to rent a car so that you can get off site. The conference venue tends to be a resort, which means that it's not really walkable. So if you don't have a car, you're either stuck going to the bars and the restaurants at the hotel, which are going to be more expensive, or you're kind of stuck waiting for other people to invite you to plans or to kind of attach yourself to a group that's going off site. If you have a car, you can also be more selective about inviting people to dinner, because there will be attendees who do not have access to a car, who are wandering around the hotel. If there's someone that you wanted to hang out with, it would be a good opportunity to invite them to go off site and have dinner. My next tip is to go to a conference with a friend. I think that this may very well be the biggest reason why my conference experience is so different now. The first two conferences I went to in my 20s, I was by myself. I did not have friends. Well, there were very few people my age anyway. And now the last three conferences in my 30s that I've been to, I have a buddy, Allison. We share the room, we share the cost of the rental car. If we don't want to try to socialize anymore, we can just hover or hang out with the other person. And it's just really nice to have this close camaraderie. Just having someone there who is like a little touch point, kind of like a little launching pad, and someone that you can talk to at the end of the day about the people that you've met, about the talks that you've seen, because they've been meeting people on their own as well. You can introduce each other to all the people that you've talked to. So you're doing this, you're expanding your network with less effort. And I think that that has made all the difference. Here is my final tip, which can apply even if you're a beginner, is to plan to come back to every conference if you can afford it. Even though I started going to these conferences 11 years ago, I've only gone to 5. I paid for all of them myself but one. So, knowing that the cost is going to be between $3,000 to $4,000, it makes sense why I didn't go to that many. But part of it was, even though my employer at some point was willing to pay, it was kind of boring. Like, I didn't really want to keep going because I didn't have that shift in my conference experience yet. But I think part of that is also that I was going to the conferences in kind of this like piecemeal way. So my first one, I went and then I skipped a year and I went again. Now I've been going for the last 3 years. And there's something to be said about that regularity, where there was someone that I met last year. I can talk to them again this year. There's someone that I didn't get to talk to as much this year. I know that next year I'll get to see them, and then we can build the relationship really slowly. And that's part of what I think makes a stronger relationship, or this repeated exposure, even if it's once a year. You can communicate outside of that time too if you really hit it off, but there's no pressure to make strong relationships at a single conference. The conference experience also improved in the past few years because there's been more and more young people. I think there was the most young people this year of all the years I've been, and it feels like I'm finally meeting a cohort of arborists, and we'll be moving forward in our careers together in the upcoming decades. And we'll have this conference as a meeting place every single year. We'll see each other every year if we end up attending. And it's just such a different experience. And it makes me realize that this is what all the older arborists have been doing. That's why they keep coming to these even when they're nearing retirement. It's not so much about getting stuff from talks, it's about seeing their friends. If you're a young person, if you go to the ASCA conference and you see other young people, talk to them. Again, you have to moderate your expectations. Young is 30s and 40s. And generally, I find that the other young people are really excited to see more young people, just like I'm excited. So those are my tips. Kind of a silly time to release them since the conference has just passed, but my experience is very fresh. I got new experiences this year, so I wanted to share this for future reference.